Hello, this is Cody.
Hello, Cody Snodgres, Daniel Ott from the Edge Television Broadcast.
Hey, it's great to hear from you, brother. How you doing?
Man, it's good to hear from you. I understand you're in the middle of a snowstorm over there.
Yes, sir. We're at 9,000 feet here in Colorado in the USA, and we're having a big snowstorm right now, so it's a great night for an interview.
All right. Well, even the snipers can't get you in a snowstorm, can they?
I guess not. It depends on who they are, though. There's some pretty good ones out there.
Hey, let me ask you something. Somebody said, do you know Lieutenant Colonel S.C.? Have you ever heard of him?
S.E.?
Lieutenant Colonel S.C. Greg Gendrich.
No, I don't know it.
Okay. Just thought I'd ask there. Well, Cody, I know it's your first time on the broadcast. I appreciate you coming on the show, doing the show with us tonight. We're going to get into some deep subjects tonight with you. But before we do, I want you to sort of give people a brief overview of your life and how you got into Black Ops and what you did.
Yeah, we in 1974, I graduated from high school down there in Dallas, Texas, and scored in the top of 1% in the SAT test in physics. And going into college, and then so in college, the CIA came to recruit me based on those test scores, and I turned down recruitment at that time with them. And I later graduated with the double bachelor's degree in math and physics, and then went into graduate school to work on my master's science. Then I had begun working with Black Ops with some Vietnam veterans that worked for the CIA in Vietnam, and we're back in the States doing stuff, and then I got to fly the Space Shuttle simulator down there at NASA in graduate school. And when I left graduate school there, I worked at Chevron as a geophysicist, Chevron Oil Company in Houston. That was a civilian front. And then went up to Tulsa, Oklahoma as a petroleum and research geophysicist with Amoco Production Company in the early 80s. And that was, from 82 through 85, we were involved in the ops over in Arkansas with the Clintons there. It was part of, the Bolin Amendment that was passed, and Reagan ordered CIA director to go around them and start arming the Contra rebels down in Nicaragua. And the Sandinistas were being run by Daniel Ortega down there, so we were involved in those ops there, moving arms down there, and then they were bringing drugs, cocaine back. We detail all that in the book that I've written here, Choosing the Light, Dark Secrets of the Oklahoma City Bombing. And then, later on, we did various ops in different countries, different times. I was in Project Slammer in 91, September 91. We can talk about that later. I died in that, had a near-death experience, died twice, had to shock me back. That was an assassination program with CIA. Then later on was offered a job to bomb the Murrah building, Alfred P. Murrah building in October 94. That whole story's in the book too. And then turned that job down based on patriotic grounds. And then later on, we were involved in Operation Stingray with the DEA and ATF up in Colorado Springs. And so this story, we've told this around. If anyone wants to hear, the full thing, you can look on several, there's YouTube videos been put out by John B. Wells at Caravan to Midnight. We have one there, and also Dave at the X-22 report. We've done dozens and dozens of them around the world. So that's just a basic overview. I was in Black Ops 20 years and then retired. I waited 22 years to tell the story about what happened with the Murrah building and the real reasons why it was bombed. And, they planted me with false evidence, threw me in prison, put me in front of Judge Edward Nottingham in the 10th Circuit, who was, he was nominated to his position by George Bush Sr., director of CIA in the 70s. And then the prosecutor they had up here was Tom Strickland, and he was with a law firm, Brownstein, Hyatt, Faber, and Strickland in Denver, Colorado. And Norman Brownstein, the principal in that law firm, he was once worked for the Council of Six for the CIA. That's a council of attorneys that works with the IG office and stuff to cover blowback. And so the whole thing was set when Clinton got to be president. When CIA picked me up, they asked me direct questions about Bill Clinton. The whole story's in the book about how they planted me with evidence, threw me in there beside Timothy McVeigh and so forth. And so we waited. We wrote the book. We got the story out, and we've done a lot of interviews telling it. So I can go into detail into anything you want. It just depends on how much time we have.
I'll tell you what. Why don't we just start with that? Because I've got several questions about the Oklahoma City bombing myself. But you said that they approached you. And I heard you say in an interview that somebody with a backpack with $500,000 approached you.
Yeah, that was in October of 1994, and that was Harold Leonard, another CI asset contractor, and we met in a location out in the woods, in the mountains, and he said, we have a job for you, and I said, what kind of job is it? He said, it's an EOD job, and I said, what country are we going to? And I thought it'd be Saudi Arabia. We had jobs over there, but he said, no, this one's here in the States, and I said, well, what kind of deal is it? He said, it's a federal building. And I said, which one? He said, it's the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Bldg. And he had a purple and black backpack with it had $500,000 in it. And he said, we'll give you half now and then half when it's done. And you can have your standard EOD team or whatever you need to get the job done. And I was already at the end of my operational career. I'd been injured. I'm 100% totally and permanently disabled now with severe PTSD.
Oh.
It's what my medical files say, but I'd had a lot of broken bones and different things, and I was at the end of my career, and I thought that they were offering me this job for Apache job. There was no way I was going to take a job like this. And so when all that happened and Timothy McVeigh actually was the Apache, we can talk about how the Murrah building was wired and why, they actually did it. A lot of people don't know the real reasons why that op was ordered. Mm-hmm. But I turned it down, and at that point turned from a CI asset to a liability. And I left the country for a while and came back. But all that story is detailed in the book. It's a 700-page book, Choosing the Light, Dark Secrets of the Oklahoma City Bombing. So
yeah. Okay. So they offered you money, and you turned it down. Of course, I guess if anybody turns the Clintons down or their operation, they end up on a list. And it's interesting. I don't know if you know this, but Alexandria Cortez said of her political enemies in the last couple of days that she was going to put them on a list if they supported Donald Trump. Did you hear that?
No, I didn't hear it, but I have a very low opinion of that person. She was a bartender, before she got into politics, and I think she's just kind of going on her looks. Yeah. And I don't really put much credence in her. I don't think she's going to last long. Well,
like I say, when anybody says a list, of course, I instantly think of the Clinton list. But okay, so you declined the offer. Do you know why? I mean, I would think they would have done a psychological workup on you before they even approached you to see if you would be compliant to their demands or their bribe attempt. So do you think you were psychoanalyzed before, or were you just random, or they just knew you? I mean, why were you picked to do that job?
Well, they needed someone with EOD, explosives demolition training, and they needed someone like me. What I figured they were going to do when they offered me that job, I immediately got a bad feeling about all of it. And I told Harold Leonard, I said, you guys have went too far this time. This is our own people, our own country, and I'm not doing it. I don't mind going overseas and doing stuff like that, but you guys have just went too far. And they have psych profiles on everybody, and they watch you through time. So they had, in my opinion, I don't know this for a fact, I think there were other people who were approached to do that job. And this was about 6 months before it actually went up on April 19th of 95. Mm-hmm. So they settled on McVeigh, and they wanted people who had, a bone to pick with the federal government. And, McVeigh himself had been injected with an implantable microchip when they were all getting their anthrax shots going into Desert Storm 1 in January 91. And then the protein coat failed on that, and he got a big red sore in his buttocks and had to pull it off. He was also at the Waco Branch Davidian thing and saw what they really did down there, and we tell the story in the book about what really happened at Waco, not the government lies. So, he had also went into the Special Forces after he got back from Iraq and had a M1A1 tank commander. He had won a Bronze Star for confirmed kills, and he went into the Special Forces, and they did the psych profiles there on him, and then he was pulled out. There were hundreds of guys in the class, and CIA pulled out about 10 of them, and they offered them jobs to be covert agents. In other words, their front would be a Special Forces soldier, and that was their front, their cover. It's an official cover. And then he returned that down. They offered him jobs to blow up buildings, assassinate people, move drugs, just like the Operation 40 stuff with Felix Rodriguez and Ted Shackley and General Richard Secord and all those guys, and the stuff that was also going on down in Mena, Arkansas in the 80s later on. They were offering him black ops positions using the Special Forces front. He didn't want to do it. And so that pissed him off. So what they do is they use a standard program of alienation and isolation. You know, when you come back from a war or you do black ops or whatever, they will use that program and watch you and then come and approach you with jobs like this. So I don't know who all else they offered this job to. I know they offered it to me, and I turned it down, and then 6 months later, McVeigh shows up, you know, in that Ryder truck down there with the diesel.
Well, the way you described that reminds me of, you said they look for people that are sort of anti-government, have a beef with the government, and that seems like that's what they did to Randy Weaver on the ridge up there. You know, they approached him and said, hey, will you cut this shotgun off? And when they didn't, of course, they had total retribution against him for not going along with their plan. They want to make him, you know, so, I mean, they enacted, I mean, they came back with a vengeance on him. And so how is it, do you feel that you... I mean, or have they got to you? Because it seems the deep state has this idea of retribution if you don't go along with the plan. Have they done anything to you since then as a result of your refusing their efforts? Oh
yeah, they had the nation's top cop, ATF agent Blake L. Butler. He planted me with false evidence, stuff I didn't do, and they threw me in federal prison. I had a perfect record. Not one traffic ticket. And Judge Edward Nottingham, who was, of course, nominated by the ex-CIA director George Bush, he was a fixer. All cases for the CIA or the NSA, like the Joe Nacho Q West case, they were all steered in the 10th Circuit Court using the PROMIS software in the DOJ, the Department of Justice. And so Nottingham fixed all the cases and made sure they never saw the light of day. And that's another reason they sent McVeigh up there to the 10th Circuit, was because they could control it. The CIA has deep control over all of the 10th Circuit, and we have a whole section in the book about Millman and Associates laundering money for the Rose Law Firm and everything out of Arkansas. It's a big thing, and so yeah, they do that. They did that to me after I refused the job, and then I talked about it one day. It was the day after the Columbine High School shootings up here. It was in the middle of DEA ATF Operation Stingray here in the Colorado Springs, Colorado. And we were sitting around, and Bill Clinton and Janet Reno, the U.S. Attorney General, were on the TV, and we were in an undercover location. It was a safe house for the feds, and they had 4mm hidden cameras. And the agent started asking me what I thought about Bill Clinton and everything, so I started going through all the things in Arkansas, the pedophile rings, the cocaine rings, the arms dealing, CIA Operation Centaur Rose, Jade Bridge, Screwworm, all of that kind of stuff, and then how I was offered the job to bomb the Murrah building, the reasons why the Murrah building were really bombed, all that stuff. Well, they saw all that. CIA took those tapes and disappeared them, and then they ordered him to plant me with false evidence. So they planted me with evidence, and then Vice President Al Gore and Janet Reno gave him the nation's top cop award later on. And so they threw me in there with Kerry James Gagan, who was another CIA asset who had been ordered to take a van load of C4 plastic explosives from Denver, Colorado down to Trinidad, Colorado 3 days before the Murrah building went up. This is April 16th of 95. And he saw 3 Middle Eastern men. They were his contacts. He didn't know who their contacts were. Standard black ops procedure, you know, to minimize blowback in case anyone gets caught. And they had plans in English to the Murrah building. and he saw all this. And he got spooked, and he came back and went to the Secret Service office and told him, look, I just took a van load of C4 down there. I think I'm being set up. I don't want to be Apache. I don't want to be anything. Well, CIA got wind of that from the Secret Service. They had the FBI plant him with false evidence, and they put him in there with me and McVeigh and Terry Nichols and Gagan. We were the ones that had operational knowledge of this thing. And so all these stories are in the book. It's a 700-page book, and it's all detailed. I know I'm jumping around in time, but there's so much here. So fire away.
All right. Well, let's just get to a couple questions. I have questions of my own, but I want to involve our viewers. We're simulcasting from our website, and we're broadcasting on our YouTube channel, and we're audio casting on our TuneIn radio program. So 3 different streams are going out from this program right now. All right, this is just a basic question for you. Hey, it says, Cody, where about in Colorado do you live, general area?
About 50 miles southwest of Colorado Springs.
Okay.
We're way out here in the mountains. This little place is 4 feet to the National Forest, about 9,000 feet.
Hey, do you guys, instead of clouds, do you have like clouds of marijuana smoke that travel across Colorado?
Yeah, since they did the recreational marijuana up here, and then it's legal to grow like 12 plants, and it's pretty lax up here. The state of Colorado's made a lot of money, billions of dollars off the sale of marijuana. A lot of people come in and out of the state to get it, and they also have a real large hemp farm here. It's one of the biggest ones in the U.S., and they do the CBD oil, for pain. There's a lot of veterans in this area. In Colorado Springs, they have the 4th Infantry Division, the 10th Mountain Division at Fort Carson, Peterson Field Air Force Base, Shriver Space Command Center, Cheyenne Mountain, the Air Force Academy, and so forth. Down in Pueblo, they have the Pueblo Depot, and then up in Denver, it's Buckley Airfield and all that. So there's lots of veterans up here, and a lot of them
partake.
Daniel, they use the CBD oil and the marijuana for their PTSD and injuries and so forth. So it's a really big market here.
Okay. Okay. All right. This is from Doreen out of the YouTube chat. Why did they want the Murrah Federal building brought down?
That's a great question, and you're going to have to give me a little bit of time because we really need to go through this. This is something most Americans don't know. All
right. Take it away.
All right. So we go back to Saddam Hussein. He was a paid CIA asset. Okay, a lot of people don't know that, and just like Manuel Noriega in Panama was a paid CIA asset. So you go back to Iraq. When he came to power in the Ba'ath Party, they fought a long and bloody war with Iran, and Iran had a 10-to-1 infantry advantage. Now, we were allies with Saddam at that point. Donald Rumsfeld went over there, Secretary of Defense, and gave him satellite intelligence and so forth. Well, during the Iran-Contra stuff that we were involved in the 80s, okay, they covertly armed Saddam Hussein with 2 main weapons. One of them was the Hawkeye 123 cluster bombs. The CIA copied the plans with microfilm. This whole story is in the book with dates, times, names, everything. And they set up a front company in Argentina, and zirconium is one of the elements, the key elements in the cluster bomb. It's one of the most efficient killing weapons for ground troops, aerial from the air, ever designed. And a key ingredient is zirconium, but it's on our banned export list. So they faked agricultural reports and got it through the agricultural department. They set up a company down there, and then they shipped all these things over through Africa and our station in Amman, Jordan, and other places, and sent them to Saddam. The other thing they armed him with, in case they were overrun by the Iranians, is the AIM strain of anthrax, which was made at Fort Detrick, Maryland. This is a weaponized form of anthrax. It has a very small a very small spore size and an altered protein coat to make it readily absorbable and kill people faster. So they designed that. They snuck it over there to him, okay? And so when the Iran war was over, it was about an 8-year bloody war, and then later Saddam Hussein, who was our ally, he invaded Kuwait. And when he invaded Kuwait, they went through that little country in about 6 hours and poised several tank divisions and stuff on the Saudi border. So the Saudis were scared, and they put pressure on our administrations over here to do something. So George Bush and them cooked up the Desert Storm thing, and now they had a problem. The Reagan administration, Bush had covertly armed Saddam with all this stuff. The American people didn't know it. Now we had to demonize our former ally, okay? So we were going to invade them and kick him out of Kuwait, but we had a problem. Our standard anthrax vaccines, it's a 6-month course. You give one shot every month to build immunity for a highly virulent strain, a biological weapon. And Bush and them didn't have the time. They needed to kick Saddam out quick before he invaded Saudi, and it would have disrupted all the oil prices and everything. Been a major economic thing. So anyway, they passed FDA testing, and they cooked up a brand new anthrax vaccine that only took 1 month. I'm getting to the Murrah building here, so
not a problem. Take
you
your
just
time.
have to understand all the stuff that went on in the background with the Pentagon. So they cooked up a 1 shot, super fast anthrax vaccine, and they started giving it to our troops. And there was approximately 480,000 of our troops over there in theater in January 91. That's where McVeigh was, in the M1A1 tanks. And in those tanks, they used a new munition. It was a depleted uranium munition, a sabot round. It was 9 inches long of uranium-238, and these were tank busters. They had enough kinetic energy to knock a Soviet T-72 tank turret, which weighs about 11 tons, up like a tumbleweed. That's a predominant tank that Saddam was using. And so these things were very efficient. And they deployed about 200 tons of this depleted uranium. It's the first time it had ever been used in war. And what was happening was the kinetic energy was so high on these things, and the A-10 Warthogs were also using the 30-millimeter chain guns with the depleted uranium. And this stuff was exploding, Daniel. And when it exploded, it made a big fireball, and it was creating brand new elements like uranium oxide and uranium dioxide. And the problem we had was our standard MOP gear for the NBC suits that our troops were wearing, the British too, and some of our other allies. There was 28 nations in the coalition there. These micron particles of this poisonous uranium stuff were about 4 microns, and our NBC suits only went to 10 microns. So what was happening, our troops were breathing this stuff. And this stuff was going into the thyroid glands and the reproductive glands. And most of the troops were men, so it was going into their testicles. So what was happening was they were absorbing all this low-level poison plus the anthrax shots. And these were creating autoimmune disorders. They had squalene as an adjunct, an adjunct like thimerosal or aluminum they put in the standard flu shots. So this stuff was highly toxic, and it made a lot of us sick. This was all later called the Gulf War syndrome. Okay, so when our guys got back, they made love to their wives, and this poison, this radiation, was being transmitted in the semen into the ovaries of the women, then to the children, then from their children down to the grandchildren and so forth. And the Pentagon had a huge problem, just like the Agent Orange thing in Vietnam. Okay, this was a new toxin, new weapons, never been used before, and it was creating what they called this Gulf War syndrome. And the Pentagon did not know how many generations down they would have medical culpability for all of this. It could have run into the hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars for this radiation exposure. So what happened was Senator Christopher Shays, he's a Republican from Connecticut on the Armed Services Committee. All this stuff's detailed in the book. I have the lot numbers to Dover Air Force Base, the vaccine numbers. This book took me 4 years to write. It's highly researched, 700 pages. It's an excellent book. It's got a lot of stuff in it most Americans have never seen. But anyway, Christopher Shays was sitting on an Armed Services Committee, and he was tasked with getting payments and medical culpability for all our sick Gulf War veterans who were coming back. There was approximately 480,000 of them. And so he told the FBI, look, we need to gather all the medical records from all these vets. It was a Herculean task. And they gathered all these records for a future hearing, just like they did with the Agent Orange settlement with DuPont Chemical in the Vietnam fiasco with the dioxin they were spraying in Operation Ranch Hand. That was like 69, I think, to 71 was the name of that op, where they sprayed the highlands in Vietnam with all that stuff. And we have a section in the book about that as well. But getting back to Christopher Shays, he ordered FBI to get all these records, and guess where they stored them, Daniel? At the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Bldg. And so when the building was blown up, okay, all those records were lost. And it got the Pentagon off the hook for hundreds of billions of dollars in future medical costs, maybe even trillions. They didn't know how many generations down this thing would go. And so in September 19th of 96, okay, the Murrah building went up April 19th of 1995. So September 19th of 96, in the congressional hearings that were still ongoing for the Gulf War syndrome, the DOD admitted at the hearings that over 400,000 Gulf War syndrome records had, quote, disappeared. Okay? And we have a little part of that copied in the appendix to the book. And so that was one of the reasons that the Murrah building blew up. Okay? Another reason that op was ordered, it goes back to Arkansas with the Clintons in the 1980s and the aforementioned Iran-Contra affair. Oliver North, codenamed John Clancy, Felix Rodriguez, they were Operation 40 operatives all the way back from Vietnam and the Air America stuff, moving the China white heroin into, the serviceman's body cavities and all that stuff. General Richard C. Cord, CIA agent Ted Shackley, they were all later went to Costa Rica to continue their operations and got thrown out of that country and banned for life. But you go back into Arkansas with the Clintons, Hillary at the Rose Law Firm. Bill Clinton was a paid CIA asset, just like Saddam Hussein and Manuel Noriega. He worked for the CIA for a long time. So did Hillary. And the op there was the Centaur Rose op that I was in, and they were moving arms down into Nicaragua, Central America. There was a front company set up there in Mena called Rich Mountain Aviation. That was Barry Seal. He was in 1963, he was in the 20th Special Operations Group there at Fort Bragg, and then sent to Vietnam, came back, and he worked with some of the same guys that I worked with. Some of them are deceased, and some of them are still alive, and we don't violate the 1982 Intelligence Identities Protection Act, the IIPA. You can't disclose the name of a person that's operational. It's a felony. So we use some of the names in the book, and then the other parts of it we don't tell. But getting back to Arkansas, all those records from all those operations, they were moving about $100 million a month in cocaine, coming back to pay for the op. The Bolin Amendment had been passed in February 1984, and CIA directors set up these covert ops inside our country. It was illegal for the CIA to operate domestically here in the U.S. Now, after 9/11 and the Patriot Act was passed, they changed that, and the CIA then moved their domestic counter terrorism division underneath Buckley Air Force Base right here, the New World Order hub under the Denver airport and all that stuff. So anyway, back to Arkansas. All these operations were going on down there, and we were helping the Contras. I got offered a job to teach hand-to-hand combat to the troops, to the Contras down there, but I was too busy up here doing all this stuff. And so all these operations were ongoing, centered around the Mena airport, and they had to wash the money through fronts like the Whitewater scandal, the real estate scandal, Jim and Susan McDougal at the bank there in Little Rock. They went from there to the Worthington Bank in Atlanta, and then later out to the BCCI Bank. That's a Bank of Commerce and Credit International out in the Caymans. Now, all this stuff's detailed in real high level in the book. I've got lots of files and lots of stuff for anybody interested. I'm just going really fast here, covering a whole lot of stuff in a short time. But all those records and all those operations had to be shut down eventually. They were illegal operations. That's why they were black ops. And so all those records, for the investigations of those ops, while these things were ongoing through 82, 83, 84, 85 with the Clintons, the Bushes, Ronald Reagan, all the stuff that was going on with the Iran-Contra thing, it had stirred civilian domestic law enforcement's attention. And the DEA, the IRS, the ABI, that's the Arkansas Bureau of Investigation, they'd all began investigating the events in Mena there at Rich Mountain Aviation, where all these covert ops were going on. So all their files were collected, and they were put in the Little Rock field office, the FBI field office there. And just prior to the Murrah building being detonated on April 19th of 95, those records were ordered to be moved to the Murrah building. Now, you got to remember, later on, okay, you're talking about the Whitewater investigation. That began July 26th of 1994, okay? So all these records that could be used to indict Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and the Bushes and Reagan, okay? All these records were moved over there, and then the building blew up, and they were lost. Now, we know from Craig Roberts, he was a Tulsa police detective, and I was working in Tulsa as a geophysicist for Amoco Production Company. That was my civilian cover. He got a call from an FBI agent in the Little Rock field office, and they said, hey, they're moving all these records out of here. And there was a whole bunch of them that could have indicted the Clintons and the Bushes and all of them, and they were moved to the Murrah building, and they were lost. So that was a second reason that building was detonated. The third reason, to answer the question this girl has asked here, and it's a good question. I mean, a lot of people don't know these things, but Bill Clinton, when he was first elected, tried to get the Anti-Effective Death Penalty and Anti-Terrorism Act passed. I think it was Bill S751 or something. I've got it in the book. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but he tried to get that passed, and didn't have the votes in Congress. And then after the Murrah building and the terrorism acts that went on there, it scared Congress, and he got the votes for that. And in that bill, if you read it, I've got sections of it in the book here. It eviscerates parts of our Constitution and takes away a lot of rights, creates a lot of things about moving UN troops to our soil and all that kind of stuff that a lot of people don't know about. So he got that passed and got that legislation in there. So those are the three basic reasons why that op was done to, destroy the building and all these records.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money, and there's a lot of high-level figures involved in our government that were protected by the destruction of these records. And during the Clinton impeachment hearings later on, after the Monica Lewinsky scandals and the Jennifer Flowers and all the sex stuff that went on, there were records about that in there too. So Clinton got off the hook on that. Mm-hmm. So this is a big story, and that's why it took 700 pages. The first version of this book was 1,200 pages, and we had to cut it way down. But all this stuff's detailed in here with dates, names, times. I'm just giving you a rough thing here. After they closed off the Centaur Rose operation, that was an arms and a weapons op. The second part was Operation Jade Bridge, and that CIA op was to bring the Nicaraguan pilots, the Contra pilots, up here and train them on light aircraft, single-engine aircraft like Cessna 152.
Well, Cody, seems like I remember that the Rose Law Firm also burned a bunch of records right behind that building, their own building.
Yeah, well, in the state of Arkansas, you remember when Clinton went up to the White House, his first AG appointment was Hubble, and then he got indicted in the state of Arkansas, and he had to quit, and then they moved Janet Reno. I got a story in the book. One of my associates, he was a captain in the U.S. Army in Vietnam. He did 2 tours there. It's Captain Glenn Wilson. I can talk about him because he's deceased now from Agent Orange, but he worked for the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, helped plan some of the operations in 1979 when we rescued our hostages over in Tehran when the Ayatollah Khomeini took power from the Shah. I had friends in ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence, over there, and that story's in the book too. But all of this stuff ties together It's all tied together in the book. And I'm sorry, I just lost track of your question. What was it again?
Well, that's okay. Let's go ahead and take some questions, as a matter of fact, Cody, because we've got a bunch of questions coming in from our various chats going on out there. So let's run through a few of these real quick. Southern Boy from the YouTube channel. Did Eric Holder play any role in the OKC bombing?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
It's possible.
Okay.
He played a big part in that, in Fast and Furious, the gun running thing down in Mexico.
He sure did. Yeah, I didn't know. I actually thought it was before his time. DARPA from a question says, how much drugs does our government bring into this country?
Okay, that no one knows that.
Okay.
It's really hard question to answer, but they do bring in a lot. In 2018 over in Afghanistan, that was one of the biggest opium crops ever in the history of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to move that and sell that stuff. We've been in Afghanistan a long time.
Yes.
And the CIA is controlling a lot of that heroin in their black ops worldwide. Now in Vietnam, you recall they had the Air America thing, and they were moving that triad opium from Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And that was the aforementioned Ted Shackley and General Richard C. Cord. General Mitch Warbell, he was another guy that was involved, and they poisoned him and killed him to shut him up. Yeah. I know he was at one of my handlers' houses, one of my CIA handlers' houses when that happened. He got poisoned at a party. But they move a lot of drugs around the world. They use the cartels as fronts. One of my girlfriends used to work in Miami, and at one point she had dinner with Pablo Escobar while he was the largest coke dealer in the world. And back when they were cleaning up the Centaur Rose op, they were moving about $100 million a month in cocaine. And in the book, I tell how the whole detail of how all this was done. The chicken Tyson trucks, Tyson food trucks, the whole thing. And Barry Seal, the pilot, he was shot February 19th, 1986, and he was murdered. They had 4 Colombian hitmen come up with 9mm Max and kill him.
Okay,
that same day.
All right, let me ask you, Cody, is this the reason why the Democrats are so adamant against building a wall, because they want those drugs still coming up through the southern border?
No, I don't know so much as that. That wall may be being built to keep us in. Did you ever think about that?
Well, I'll tell you what, who'd want an American down there? All right, let's get to a few more questions, and let's see if we can keep these answers short, because you've got a lot more to say.
Yeah, I'm going to try to shorten the answers, but to answer the question, okay, there's a lot of drugs being moved in, and I don't know, there's Freeway Ricky Moss. We talk about that in the books with the Crips and the Bloods and the Nicaraguan contacts that he had. They were all CI guys moving the coke in. So there's a lot with the crack and the heroin and all that. It's a big thing. It's a worldwide thing, and there's a whole lot of it, okay?
All right. This is from Doreen out of the live chat. Are the Clintons Satanists? And a lot of people say that. It goes deep on that. It may be deeper than you want to go, Cody. There's some people say that they say maybe have cannibalistic sessions, spirit cooking, that type of thing. Are the Clintons themselves Satanists? Is she a witch?
Well, yeah, when you
like
say
one.
the Clintons, you got to kind of separate Bill and Hillary a little bit. Hillary Clinton is a lot worse than Bill.
I believe that.
She's been to Bohemian Grove and all that stuff out there, and people can Google that up. Hillary Clinton is a witch. She's a 4th-degree coven witch. She has been tied in with the Temple of Set and the Church of Satan. I'm writing a 3rd book right now, and I'm detailing the Clintons' ties, especially Hillary Clinton, to people that are in these pedophile rings, and they also do, child sacrifices and so forth. Hillary Clinton is a Satanist. Hillary Clinton is a witch. I have a whole lot of stuff going into this 3rd book about this. I have firsthand knowledge of this stuff, and this book's going to be really good when it comes out. But it's going to be called Holding the Light, Spiritual Forces in Black Ops. That's the name of the new book. It's not published yet, but Yeah, that's a great question. And I would caution people out there, whether you're Democrat or Republican, we've got to learn to stop looking through the lens of this bi-party system, because if a person's a criminal or a Satanist or a pedophile, we need to get rid of them, and we don't want them in our government. But Hillary Clinton is a high-level witch involved in all kinds of dirty,
you know, a lot of times when I do my ranting points, I don't know if you've ever seen it. If you ever want to see my ranting points, it's a completely different part of the show, but I usually put that up on my Facebook feed. You can watch the replays there. But I mean, a lot of times I'll talk about, you know, political things. You got AOC, and you've got all these, you know, that I'm not a Republican hack myself. I don't, you know, look, I mean, I'll name the Bushes. The Bushes on my hit list. McCain. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people. You know, I'm not nothing. It just there just seems to be a larger amount of evil coming from one side. Let's get back to questions. Now, Dreamwalker asked the question, what is their end game? But Cody, I think you sort of, I mean, as far as the Oklahoma City bombing, you've really answered that. And obviously, you go way more detail in your book. But is there a larger end game of worldwide control, moving the country to martial law? What is there a larger end game afoot?
Yes, there is. It's the New World Order. You know, the Rothschild banking empire, the Rockefeller Foundation, and so forth. You know, bankers, Daniel, don't care about a particular conflict. They care about the debt that the conflict produces. Okay, and we have a section in the book about the international banking trade, how they launder the money, like the heroin money from Afghanistan or the coke money from Colombia, and how I've been all through Colombia and Peru and all that down in there, and how they control those markets through the cartels, and then the cartels use the gangs and so forth to move the stuff. But yeah, there is an end game. It's the New World Order end game. They want complete control. Okay, they want to control everything: the Amazon timber, the oil and gas in the Niger Delta or the Caspian Sea. They want all the oil, all the water, all the people, and they want to stick a microchip in us.
Wow.
There's a company in Sweden called the Biohack, a guy named Johan Osterland, and they started making these chips in Stockholm in 2017. I got a lot of friends and connections over there. It's called the Biohacks International, and it's a leading provider of these devices in Sweden. The New World Order wants to microchip us all. They want to reduce the population of the world approximately 500 million, as is stated on the Georgia Guidestones. You know, your listeners are probably familiar with the Georgia Guidestones. If not, you can Google them up. They're right here in the U.S., and they state many of the New World Order's intentions. So we have to be clear here. This is a battle between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. The forces of darkness are the bankers, you know, the greedy, corrupt politicians, the pedophiles, the people in the New World Order that want complete control. And they've been working decade after decade, drop by drop. You know, they stage false flag events like the Oklahoma City bombing or 9/11, Sandy Hook, Parkland shootings, so forth. They stage them to scare the people, and they propagandize the people. It's strategic deception. With PSYOP, psychological operation. They keep us divided and fighting each other, and they keep our minds fearful, and they fragment our consciousness with fear, okay? And they keep us disempowered and disconnected, okay? And that's how they control us. And this agenda is coming out all over the world. You can look up in the sky and see the geoengineering chemtrails. They're coming out with a 5G, which we can talk about here later. I have some interesting information here some of your listeners may not know, but this is a big worldwide agenda. They're using high technology, like directed energy weapons, to start fires in California, banking things, AI algorithms in Google, YouTube, Facebook, the censorship. All of this is being tied together. It's happening right in front of our faces. And what we're trying to do is wake people up by showing them the truth, because the truth will set us free. That's a slogan in the CIA there, the truth shall set you free. It's also in the Bible. But there is a big agenda, and it's coming to a head. The signs of it are everywhere. And if we don't wake up, our children are going to be microchipped like dogs. And we're going to be sprayed like bugs from the sky. and our world is going to change into an Orwellian nightmare of this new world order.
Well, Cody, what you're saying now, this is why I believe that this sort of abortion ghoulish events that's been happening in various state capitals about live birth abortion. I believe that is part of the attempt to devalue human life. It's not, it's, under the guise of women's rights. Of course, I guess I'm not sure how women's rights applies to somebody on the table. And this is interesting too, because the governor of Virginia says that once a baby comes out and is on the table, then a group can stand around like a damn witch coven. And because he says, well, then if it's alive, then the doctor and the mother, they can consult and decide whether or not this baby lives. It's a damn witch coven, if you ask me. Some kind of infanticide, probably going to eat them, whatever, or sell them on sell the parts on eBay. But the devaluing, if people don't find that offensive, if they're not, and I said this in Rating Points, if they're not putting stuff on their Facebook or their Twitter feed, some objection, something other than cat videos, funny cat videos, they have to understand. And you just said it, we are at war, but the devaluing, that's the first salvo. And so when it will come to those people who disagree with the system, will easily be rounded up. People say that's conspiracy talk now, but hey, infanticide was conspiracy talk just 2 years ago. So people say they would never go to past trimester, to a live birth. But now that here's where we are. So you're right. Incrementally, they're moving us in a certain direction through psych ops and various other things. And so people have got to draw a line in the sand and do what they can do to keep this country free. All right, let's get back to questions for you, Cody, real quick. This is from PGLF 1982 out of YouTube. Is it true McVeigh was on the street screaming about a chip in his head after the bombing?
I don't know that. What we have in this book is the documentation of his letters while he was at Fort Bragg. Okay, they had Desert Storm in January 91. He won his Bronze Star. Terry Nichols was his tank commander there. He won his Bronze Star, had confirmed kills. He got out. He wanted to continue his Army career, and he went to Fort, it's either Bragg or Benning. I've got it in the book. And then he joined the Special Forces. And he had gotten a shot. Everyone got their standard anthrax shots and other shots to go in theater to Iraq. And he started getting a sore on his right buttocks. And it got red and everything, and he didn't know what it was, and they cut it out and found out it was a chip. Now, that chip was part of a covert test the Pentagon was doing with Lockheed Martin. Okay, they had a satellite system called the BEAST, BEAST, Battle Engagement Area Simulator Tracker. And what it was the satellites were going to read these RFID microchips, like the Biohacks Corporation I was just talking about in Sweden. They were going to read these chips from space. And they were going to do it in a real-time battlefield condition to test them with smoke, oil well fire, sand, dust, so forth. And so this thing, the protein coat, this was an early version of these things. And the protein coats on them failed. So the autoimmune system kicks in and rejects it. So you get a sore. They cut it out, and he got really mad about that. But what was the question again?
Well, the question was, wait a minute, the question went away. Oh no! It was did Timothy McVeigh scream that he had a chip in his head?
Yeah, I never had anything. I ran across that. What we got were copies of the letters he wrote his sister Jennifer. Okay, from Fort Bragg, where he complained of this chip in his buttocks, and he felt betrayed because they had used him as a guinea pig without his knowledge. And it's illegal, to inject things into people without telling them about it, But anyway, the anthrax shots were bum, and then he got the chip. Not everyone got that chip. They just did it to certain people. And I suspect he was targeted for that, and then later on, that's why the CIA picked him with his psych profiles at Fort Bragg to offer him the black ops jobs.
All right, let's get to
But
this.
I never saw anything about him screaming on the street about a chip in his head. The only thing we've got is the actual letters he wrote his sister from Fort Bragg about the chip in his butt.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's get to this question here. This is from Ted White. He's a previous guest, actually, and I believe he recommended you, actually, for the show. He says, ask Cody about Merrick Garland, the Democrats' Supreme Court nominee they keep pressing. He worked for Janet Reno to squash the OK City bombing. Do you know anything about Merrick Garland?
No, I don't know anything about him, but I do know a lot about the new AG, William P. Barr, who was AKA CIA agent Robert Johnson. And he was down there in Mena, and he met at the Robinson bunker, the Little Rock Armory, the National Guard Armory. That's where we got a lot of our weapons and stuff out of there. They had guys inside there stealing the weapons, and then we put them in safe houses in Arkansas and over in Oklahoma and stuff, and then run them back to the Mena airport to be delivered to the Contras down there. But William P. Barr, a.k.a. Robert Johnson, he was a fixer. Wow. He was at that meeting with Bill Clinton and Felix Rodriguez, codename Max Gomez, also Oliver North, Lieutenant Colonel North, who was John Clancy, and Terry Reid, the ex-Air Force intelligence officer. He wrote the book Compromise, Bush, Clinton, CIA. I'd suggest people reading that if they're interested in this. But he's a fixer. And George Bush Sr. hired him as his Attorney General in 1991 to help cover up and squash all of the stuff from the 80s in the Iran-Contra, all the drugs in the Mena. And then what does Donald Trump do here just recently? He gets this guy as his AG, and this guy is a cover-up artist, ex-CIA agent. The American people, a lot of them don't know this. But this Merrill guy you're talking about, I don't know much about him.
Well, let me ask you, though. There are some expectations that, and of course, I've never heard of the background of William Barr either. But some say, well, is he going to rein in the Mueller investigation, or is he a straight up guy? But isn't it possible that Donald Trump does not know this type? I mean, what you're saying would be considered conspiracy, and I'm not saying it is. But from his point of view, would he just get a resume? Because none of that is going to be on his resume that hits his desk. Or do you think Donald Trump has something to do with it? Or is he blackmailed into putting this guy in there?
We did a show on this, an hour-long show all about William Barr on the day he was being considered to be confirmed in the Senate. And I told him the whole story about him down there in Mena. He was a CIA operative. He's a deep state player. He's a cover-up artist. And Donald Trump, they asked me, what do you think about Donald Trump? Do you trust him? And I said, no. I don't trust any of the politicians. I don't care which side of the aisle they're on. But if Donald Trump nominated him for that, it either means Donald Trump's ignorant of his past, which is hard to believe for the highest executive officer in our land, or he's complicit with the deep state. And the whole time, Donald Trump's been a Trojan horse. And he's not here to drain the swamp. He's bringing swamp players like Robert Barr into his administration. If he's doing it unknowingly, he's dumb and ignorant. If he's doing it knowingly, he's complicit, and he's lying to the American people. Terry Reid went to blow the whistle on all this stuff, and they planted him with evidence just like they planted me, and they sent him in the District of Kansas, United States District Court. It was November 14th, 1990. The case number was 88-10049-01. And he put this in his book, Compromise. Just like in my book, I have the court records and all the stuff in here where they planted me and how they planted me. And that's a standard deal. Whenever you go to blow the whistle on these deep state players like William Barr, a.k.a. CIA agent Robert Johnson, okay, you tell the truth about the Clintons. You tell the truth about the Bushes. You either end up slipping on a banana peel, or they'll plant you with evidence and throw you in prison.
Right, or you could end up like Seth Rich.
Yeah, we have a section in the book about Seth Rich and what happened with him.
Okay.
They hired 2 New York City police officers, detectives. I mean, there's too much to go in here, but the cover-up of Seth Rich is unbelievable. Just like Michael Hastings, Vince Foster, the Vince Foster cover-up. I have a whole little section in the book, stuff people have never heard of. I mean, it's unbelievable. The cover-up after cover-up of the Clinton death machine, the Clinton death list, Reagan, Bush. It goes across the aisle. It's not just Democrat or Republican. We're talking about how the shadow government,
well, yeah,
corporations, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, all of them.
Okay. All right, let's get to some more quick questions here. Of course, you may just answer this question from Curious out of the live chat. Is Trump a good guy or a controlled operative? And you said either he is or he's dumb. So, I mean, I think we'll just take that answer and move on to the next one. GR Mike 1. What are the perks for being in the CIA? I don't know. Is that a career? Did you actually work for CIA?
Can we go back to that other question just for a second?
Yeah, is Trump a good guy or controlled operative?
Okay, look what he's done. Just recently, okay, he passed that executive order pushing the 5G network and expanding it everywhere.
And he said 5 or 6G.
The 5G network is the New World Order control grid. That's what they're going to use in the Agenda 21 cities and stuff. Okay? And anyone pushing that is for the New World Order. Donald Trump also, outlawed the bump stocks on the guns. He's wanting to build this wall. Is this wall to keep immigrants and drug dealers and stuff out? Or is it to keep us in after they've declared martial law?
Why would they want us in?
Why would they want us in? Maybe to stop capital from leaving the country. Maybe to stop the spread of disease. There's a lot of different reasons why they could want to control a civilian population, keeping them. Maybe they want to keep them in so they can't flee and they can round them up in FEMA camps.
Hey, would that mean they need to build a wall on the northern border between Canada?
Yeah.
Well, so we'll be looking for that. All right.
Well, anyway, they got this new bill to restrict lawsuits from 5G. Did you know it's called the Radio Frequency Radiation Site Safety Information Act? It's House Resolution 7236. You can Google that up. And it limits liability to telecom companies. So what they're doing is before they've even set this 5G grid up, which is a kill grid. I mean, the military weapons from the military use this kind of stuff. We've done whole shows on it. I could talk for 2 hours about the technical aspects of all this stuff. But anyway, what they're doing is preemptively limiting the liability of these companies. They know this stuff's dangerous. They're implementing it. And now they're passing these laws before it's ever implemented so that people can't sue them.
Right.
And then down there in Palm Beach, Florida, they just exempted a lot of those people in that area from this 5G grid. One of them is Trump's estate, Mar-a-Lago down there. So Trump is pushing on one hand to get this, this 5G network passed, which is a control grid, and then exempting himself down there. See, so a lot of people don't know this stuff's going on, but it is going on right now.
Wow.
Awesome. I don't think Trump's a good guy. I think he's working for the deep state, and that his stuff is just a game, where they pretend to be for the Patriots and help everything. I may be wrong. I voted for Donald Trump, but what I'm seeing from him, like with the 5G grid and everything, is for the New World Order. It's not for America.
Wow. Well, we keep our eye on him. We got this question here. Then now we haven't gone totally whacked out conspiracy, but how about this one here? Do you know anything about aliens contacting the U.S. government?
I've heard things, and I know a whole lot about ETs and about Roswell and about all kinds of stuff like that. But I don't have any actionable intelligence. I don't have any pictures. I don't have any tape recordings. I have heard things from various people like Stanton Freeman and UFO researchers, the guy that runs the Black Vault. I can't remember his name. It's a blackvault.com.
Greenwald.
Greenwald. Yeah, I saw him speak at a place, and he's filed so many, I think like 800 or some Freedom of Information requests, and he's got documents that would suggest things that aliens have contacted our government and so forth. So that's a whole nother set of lectures. We could spend hours and hours and hours talking about that.
Okay.
But I don't have any proof. I've just heard things,
Yeah. Something I noticed going back to the Oklahoma City bombing, they executed Timothy McVeigh, one of the quickest. I mean, I don't know, within a year, 2 years, one of the quickest executions ever. Why did they do that?
Well, they did it to shut him up. That day, he was executed on June the 11th, 2001. And when they planted me with false evidence and they indicted me, the CIA picked me up, they asked me direct questions about Bill Clinton, and turned me over to the ATF DEA and FBI, and they tried to cut me a deal to snitch. and I wouldn't do it. That whole story's in the book. So they were mean to me, and they denied my bond with a perfectly clean record. I didn't have any drugs or violence on my charges, just firearms licensing charges, because I'd been the biggest Class 3 machine gun and silencer dealer here in Colorado for 3 years, and that was a front for Black Ops anyway. But when they put me up in there, they put me about 3 cells down from Tim McVeigh. I never saw him, but one of the whole orderlies, he was an Indian named Gerald Two Bulls from the reservation at Pine Ridge, South Dakota up there. He had spoken to him, and they threw him in the hole. In his cell for like 2 weeks and wouldn't let him out. What people don't realize is McVeigh, when he was there, he was under super tight security. And they had me in Supermax, solitary cell. And he was there, and they would not let any of the BOP, the Bureau of Prison Guards, even talk to him. You had to be at least lieutenant grade or higher, which means you have to have a minimum of 15 years in the BOP before you could even talk to him. And the security was very high because they didn't want McVeigh telling the truth. They didn't want him talking. And so they executed him. I was there when they took him out of there for execution. It was a big hubbub in there. And then later on, I was at the FDC, that's the Federal Detention Center in Englewood, Colorado, there in Denver. There was a guy named Nathan Chambers. And at the time McVeigh was executed, he was his attorney. He had several attorneys throughout this whole ordeal in the 10th Circuit Court, some of which is detailed in this book. But Nathan Chambers, this story's in the book too, he held McVeigh's mother's hand and sat on the front row and watched the execution there at the Terre Haute, Indiana FCI, the Federal Correctional Institute. That's where the new death chamber was. And so after that happened, a few weeks after that, he came back to the FTC, and I was in there for a legal visit, and Nathan Chambers was in there. And I walked up to him, and I said, did you get to see that execution there? And he said, yeah, I held McVeigh's mom's hand. And I said, what was it like? And he just put his hands up and covered his face and shook his head, no, and walked away. He walked out of there and left all of his clients there. I mean, the guy was shooken up. Daniel, we've had people on these interviews ask you, well, we heard all these stories, McVeigh was CIA and that execution was faked at Terre Haute and all this stuff. I don't know that stuff. That's all a bunch of conspiracy talk. We try to stick with facts and what we know and what we can document. And I'll tell you, Nathan Chambers, that attorney, I saw him probably 2 feet away from me, looking him right in the face. He believed McVeigh was executed. And McVeigh's mother believed he was executed because she was squeezing his hand and crying. And it was a horrible experience. Yeah. So that's all I've got to say about that. But the story's in the book, too.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of Scalia after he killed himself with a pillow on his face. They got him in the ground as quick as they could without even an autopsy. And it's like, and then I think you mentioned Ron Brown. Seems I remember that Ron Brown, when he died in that supposed plane crash, there was a bullet hole in his head, and they lost the X-ray records. I mean, so there's just all this foolishness around these deaths, and they just seem to be covered up. But let's get to a larger picture, Cody. If we go down the road and believe that what you're saying is true, let's say it is. Obviously, you're well versed in this, and you have so much experience and knowledge on that Oklahoma City bombing. That means that somebody measured hundreds of people's lives to just as collateral damage to do a cover up. Couldn't we extrapolate from that and say that makes the logic of a cover up or some black op or false flag with 9/11?
Exactly. There's so much. We're barely scratching the surface. I could tell you all about Scalia and how they moved his body from Texas over to El Paso, from Presidio County, because the water table in Presidio County was shallow. And they have a rule there where all medical waste from autopsies cannot be dumped into the sewage system. So they would have to store his bodily fluids and keep them there. So instead, that would, for a later forensic investigation, they couldn't have that. So they drove his body 3.5 hours to El Paso. It's a different elevation. They don't have those rules, so they could flush all the fluids into the sewage system and get rid of them. So there wouldn't be any way they could come back later and do any kind of forensic analysis on the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court guy. I could go on and on and on, but let's get back to your question. The Oklahoma City bombing, that killed 168 people, injured over 680 people. There were 324 buildings damaged over a 16-block radius. It burned and destroyed 86 cars. There was shattered glass in about 258 buildings. Cost an estimated $652 million in damages. Okay, so you're asking about this, Black Ops. Yes, 9/11, the body count it's a corollary. It's an axillary. It's like in Vietnam when they take Hill 1411. The general says, how many troops are we going to lose? It's just a number. And they don't care. That the thing is the psyop and the end result. It's just like in Oklahoma City, they sent Dr. Jolene West, the MK Ultra mind control psychologist, the specialist. They sent him down to Oklahoma City with a team of 5 or 6 other psychologists to assess the psychological damage. That's why they put bombs in the daycare. The daycare center, they wanted children dead. They wanted to pull on the heartstrings of the American people. We have all this detailed in the book.
Well, Cody, let me say something.
We have a section on 9/11 too.
Okay, let me say something on that there. I remember the day that the news was flying across the airwaves of the Oklahoma City bombing. They said, they found another bomb. And then they go, we found another bomb. And then there was 3 Middle Eastern men, which you alluded to. I remember that too. But then later, it's 1 bomb and 1 guy. So it just seems that, if you ever in an event, whenever an event happens, you got to listen to everything it's saying then, because it takes them a while to clean up the story.
Right, and here's another thing we have in the book that people don't know. This book is chock full of research and documentation. How do you control a black op like that? Let's say you're going to blow up a building, a federal building in America. There's cell phones, there's cameras, there's people, there's witnesses. How are you going to do that? You're going to pre-wire the building, then you're going to have a patsy or a fall guy like McVeigh detonate the ammonium nitrate and all. There's no way that explosion could do the damage that it did. But that's what they want us to believe. And that's the fall guy, the patsy, okay? And this whole thing goes so deep and it's so big, and we got to the bottom of it, and we people can research this stuff all they want. Jana Davis wrote another book about the Middle Eastern men. There's been a lot of books written about it all. But I just lost your initial question again. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay, because I have this other question we've got to get to. Somebody wants to know, will you ever commit suicide?
No, when I waited 22 years to write this book, okay? And I wrote it in secret. And I didn't turn it over to any publishers or anything, because I knew the CIA would get wind of it, and I would be suicided or killed or whatever. So what we went with my partner, Ole Damagard, over at lightonconspiracies.com in Europe there, and we set up 4 or 5 interviews a day, and we put it out as a PDF file and just dumped the information. That we figured the more I could get this out, the wider audience, the less chance I would be killed. Now, before we did that, I went to my physician. He's been my long-term family physician. He's got a top secret clearance. He's got a FEMA clearance. He works on a lot of military generals, colonels, all of it. And I took him a copy of the book, and I said, I wrote a letter, and I said, I'm of sound mind. I will not commit suicide. The Clintons' favorite thing, like Vince Foster and all the rest of it. And I said, I want a full, complete exam. And we did a full medical exam, blood test, heart test, everything. I said I want it all documented, so that if I'm found with a little puncture mark in the back of my head, or a strange car wreck, or slip on a banana peel or whatever, I want all this documented. And I said I want a full forensic autopsy done, unlike Justice Scalia, because I'm writing this book about the Oklahoma City bombing. I'm talking about the Clintons and the Bushes and all this stuff. I'm telling the truth in this book, okay? And I'm doing it for our country. I'm doing it because I believe America's going down the tubes, and if we don't stand up and do something, we're going to lose our country, okay? And I dedicate it to the veterans and the firefighters and all the good people, the backbone of our country. But I told my doctor, I said, I'm writing this, and I'm expecting some retribution, and
wow.
I will not commit suicide, okay? If they say I committed suicide, it's a lie. They murdered me and made it look like suicide, just like they've done on so many people.
Right, and that's a fair question that somebody asked there, because I remember specifically on Alex Jones, I think it was a madam who wrote a book about players in the 9/11, and they asked her 3 times, are you going to commit suicide? And she said no, and 2 weeks later she committed suicide. So, I mean, it's definitely, that question has to be asked. And Cody, how do you not look in your rearview mirror and wonder?
Look, I was in Black Ops for 20 years. We did a bunch of really bad stuff. This Murrah building job was just one job, okay? And there's a lot of things I'm never going to talk about, okay? I'm just not going to talk about them. And I'm writing some more books, and there's some other things. But you have to face death. And I already died in Project Slammer, okay? That we can talk about that here for a while. It'll take a little while. But all that's detailed in the book. I have a chapter 10 in the book is CI mind control, and that's where we talk about Project Slammer and what it was, how it was set up, and the vanilla part of it, and then the black ops part of it, and the assassination part of it. And it's a fascinating subject because it deals with very advanced things from the Stargate program, the MK Ultra programs, and how they were using psychic assassins and all kinds of ways to kill people with directed energy weapons, so there wouldn't be there'd be plausible deniability and so forth. So we can talk about all that. It's just going to take a while. I'm trying to jam a lot of stuff in a short time here.
Well, look, if you got time, we can go over, but if not, we'll reschedule. You have another show. Let's go into that right now about your death experience on that program.
Okay. Well, we have to get a little history here, just like with the Murrah building. In 1984 to 85, they began Project Slammer. Okay? Now, that was a code name. Now, the NSA, the DIA, the Navy, Air Force Intelligence, it was a 10-year study. Okay? And the reason they instituted this study was because we had had a number of high-level defections. Okay? Our station chief in Moscow at one point was a guy named Aldrich Ames. And he had come back to Langley and had been co-opted and turned by the KGB while his tour in Moscow. And so he was selling secrets for the Russians. And they caught him. And he's down here in Florence, Colorado at the Supermax prison. Ted Kazansky, the Unabomber, he's down there. There was another guy in the FBI, he's a 26-year counterintelligence specialist named Robert Hansen. And he was also turned by the KGB and was selling our FBI counterintelligence secrets. This is how we catch foreign spies on our own soil. And he was selling all those secrets to Soviets. Well, they convicted him. And we had another guy named Walker who was in the Navy. He was selling telemetry secrets and missile secrets for the Polaris missiles and so forth to the Russians. So we had some high-level penetrations by the KGB in our country. So they cooked up Project Slammer to find out why spies spy. And it was a psychological program to give a battery of tests to people so they could figure out why these guys spy and what measures we could take when we were recruiting people, so that we could weed these type of psychological weaknesses out. And that's what it was sold to Congress for. So it was a 10-year study. And that was the vanilla part of it, but there was a black ops part to it, okay? And Congress didn't know about it. And the white part was run by the FBI Behavioral Science Division and the CIA. And the CIA used this program as a front for their black ops. And what they were doing was using psychological testing, psychic testing, results that they had gotten from the Stargate program and the MK Ultra program. That had 149 sub-projects. We could do a whole show for 2 hours just on that. I've got a lot of knowledge about that. I've been with a lot of people that were in the MK Ultra program, like Kathy O'Brien. She wrote the book Transformation of America. But anyway, to get back to Project Slammer, the below part of it was an assassination program. Okay, the CIA has experimented a long time with how to, kill people. And if you kill a foreign dignitary or a prime minister or somebody high level, there's always blowback. And they were trying to stop the blowback. So how can you kill someone at a distance, without sending in an assassin, without sending in a guy and knifing them or shooting them or using poison darts or any of the crap they use? And they were using directed energy weapons like microwaves.
Wow.
And particle beams, and also psychic attacks, a way to project mental energy across a distance to do work. And they got a lot of this data from the Stargate program. That was a program with David Morehouse and Joseph McMoneagle. It stemmed from research that was done in the MK Ultra program in 1971 at Stanford Research Institute. They were using a psychological wing of the university there to conduct psychic experiments and mental telepathy experiments, clairvoyance, clairaudience, you name it. Ingo Swann was brought over from Israel. He's in the Israeli army. He's a very powerful psychic. Hal Puthoff and some of the other guys were there. But the CIA was using that Stargate program to project spirits, human spirits, out of their bodies to do remote viewing. Okay? Major Ed Dames is another guy for the Defense Intelligence Agency that worked in that program, because the CIA's program, the Stargate program, was morphed later to the DIA for funding issues. But to make a long story short, they couldn't see things like where the Russians' missile silos were under a forest on the Kamchatka Peninsula or something like that. So they would use these guys, put them in all these cubicles and hook up all these electronic devices to them to measure them, and they would learn how to project their spirits out in remote view and see where these silos were, because our satellites couldn't see them. The U-2 flyovers or SR-71 Blackbird flowers, nothing could see this stuff. So this was another way they call it scient, okay, psychic intelligence. Mm-hmm. And I have a whole section in the book here in Chapter 10 about this, because they have HUMINT, which is human intelligence. That's the kind of stuff we did. Mm-hmm. And then they have PHOTINT, which is photographic intelligence. They have SIGINT, the NSA stuff, signal intelligence, ELINT, electronic intelligence, and COMINT, which is communications intelligence. And in 1975, 79, when I was working with Glenn Wilson, Captain Wilson, he was one of the planners for that operation to get our guys out of Tehran. They took over our embassy there, and they tortured the CIA station chief to death, and then they moved a lot of our guys in underground tunnels, and we didn't have any satellite or HUMINT, SIGINT. We didn't have anything. And they were moving our guys around, and they needed some intelligence as to where they were so they could mount a rescue operation. So they used psychics, and they used the guys in the Stargate program and so forth to do this kind of stuff. And a lot of people don't know about all this, but it's a big thing. And like I could talk for 2 hours. I know a whole lot about it. I'm just covering the basics, okay? Mm-hmm. But this Project Slammer, they were using the black ops part of it as an assassination deal, okay? And that's the one I was involved in. And I was targeted for assassination in this program. Wow. Because we had been conducting some operations, and one of the guys on my team, his dad was a CIA agent in Bangkok, Thailand, and he died. My associate died in the middle of this op, and they blamed me for it. So they targeted me with this stuff. And that's where I died in the hospital. It was September 18th through the 22nd of 1991. Mm-hmm. And the whole story's in the book about how they hit me with this stuff. The civilian doctors didn't know what it was. They ran test after test after test, and this was a perfect tool. That's why the CIA wanted to be able to kill people at a distance with these strange energies, because they left no trace, and it left perfect plausible deniability. If you inject a poison into someone's body, Daniel, they can do a GC mass spec. That's a gas chromatography mass spectrometer. That's a standard forensic pathology tool they use to find out why somebody died, and they can figure out what poison was used. But if you're going to kill someone, at a distance, a high-level person, say Vladimir Putin, and you don't want the Russian military to retaliate against you for the hit, you have to do it in a way where there's zero blowback, because the stakes are too high. The stakes could be nuclear retaliation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm just giving you a basic overview here. We can talk for another hour if you want to about this.
So were you near death or were you dead?
No, I died when they brought me in there. I looked over. There was a guy that died right beside me, and his machine flatlined, and the nurses said, "This one's gone, let's go to the next one." Mm-hmm. And I was in convulsions, and I was throwing up and defecating at the same time in convulsions. Wow. And like I said, the civilian nurses and doctors did not know they were looking at the results of a CIA assassination from this high-level stuff. And so my head went over to the left, and I could see my machine, beeping, and then my machine flatlined. And, went beep, and then what happened was I got a tunnel. It started getting black. Mm-hmm. And then I passed out, and it was like I was going through white cotton. And my spirit floated up through this. And when it got on the other side of it, I was looking down at my body, and they were cutting my clothes off, and they started putting IVs in both arms. I was on no kind of drugs, no alcohol, absolutely nothing when this happened. And then they rolled a defib card in there, and some doctors came in there. I could see it all plainly. And I could see the spirit of the guy next to me that had just died. And I was looking down at it kind of detached, like, this is weird, And then they hit me with the defib paddles and shocked me back, and then I went through that white cotton stuff again, and I was in my body, and the doctor's face was right over my face. He was screaming at me, yelling, "Wake up, talk to me, like that." And then my head went to the left again, and my machine was beating at that point, and then it went beep, my heart stopped again.
Wow.
And the same thing happened. I got the black tunnel, my vision faded, and then I went in through the white cotton, I floated up again, and I looked down. And then they shocked me again. And so that whole story's true. I write in the book about it, and tell that's where I met my guardian angel on my second time. She came up to me. She was a spiritual form. It was like a silvery white, kind of a ellipsoid, energy. Wow. And I heard a voice in my head, at the time. It wasn't through my ears, though, because I was dead. And she said, "Do you want to go back?" And I thought, no. I mean, I'm laying there covered in shit and puke, and, my clothes were cut off. I was a mess. And she said, "Do you want to go back?" I thought, no. And then she said, "If you want to go back to do the great light work, then I will go with you." Okay? And so I decided to, and that's when I decided when I came back. That was in September 91. Then later on, they offered me the job to bomb the Murrah building. I turned that down. Then I decided if I could ever, get out of all of this crap, when they planted me with evidence, threw me in prison, they held me there. I didn't even have a motions hearing, Daniel, in 4.5 years. They wouldn't even let me speak. The whole thing was hushed up. They kicked the court reporters out, the transcribers, the marshals. The hearings were sealed. All kinds of stuff like that went on. But I made up my mind that I would get the truth out, and then I'd be a truth warrior. So I know what it's like to be dead. I have been dead twice clinically, and I am not afraid of death. I am not afraid of the CIA. They've murdered more people around the world than smallpox. We have to stand up to this evil. And I'm sticking my neck out here, showing everybody that I'm not afraid of them. I'm not afraid of the CIA. I'm not afraid to die. There are things more important in this world than my life. Our country, our children. Do you want to see your children end up with microchips? Do you want to see them being sprayed and eating glyphosate from Monsanto? What kind of world are these New World Order planners going to hand us with 5G grids everywhere? Mm-hmm. It's time we wake up. It's time we stand up and fight this evil. And I'm out on the front lines of it.
That's for sure. Is that why you chose the book titled "Choosing the Light." What's the reference there?
That is the reference, and I tell the story, of what I'm telling you now about how I died in this Project Slammer, except in the book we have a lot of detail. I have CIA declassified deals about Project Slammer in the appendix. I mean, like I said, it took me 4.5 years to write this book, and we kept it all secret. And, I went and I got research files, I got all kinds of stuff. We couldn't put any classified files in here. Although, well, I better not talk about that, but because it's a 10-year federal prison sentence to have this stuff. But let me just say that the stuff we put in here is the stuff that's been declassified, and it's documented. And the Stargate program and the remote viewing, all that stuff's in Chapter 10. This third book I'm writing right now has a lot more detail about this stuff in here. But a lot of people don't believe this stuff, like me talking about angels and dying in some CIA assassination program. They think a lot of this is BS. But the documentation for it, some of it's being declassified and some of it's coming out. Because remember, this is back in 1991. And so there's still stuff about the Gulf War from '91 that's classified.
Well, Cody, do you think that this guardian angel is still with you? Have you seen you said her? So do you feel like she's still with you?
Absolutely. That's why we opened up the Star Lodge Healing Center here, and now we do laying on of hands healing, and we do the channelings from the angel and so forth. A lot of times people will come in here. We do a lot of PTSD work with veterans and stuff, and we take them back to their time on the battlefield and stuff like that. We never charge money. We've never done any money in 20 years. It's all volunteer. It's all done for the light, for choosing the light. And we do Edgar Casey style readings for health, on people. Sometimes we see tumors inside their liver or whatever. See, when I died in the hospital, something strange happened. There were some ER physicians in a major city, and they had some people they certified died, and then they came back to life. I mean, these guys were certified dead, and they were put in the morgue, and the janitor at night was in there cleaning up, and they heard these guys tapping after they'd been certified dead, and it freaked everyone out, and they had come back to life, and they didn't understand it. So they started doing psych profiles, and they collected all these people with near-death experiences like mine, and they collected all of it, and they found that about 84% of the people that had near-death experiences come back all had increased psychic abilities, and they had increased dreams of the future and so forth. And so when you die and you cross over the veil, the dimensional veil, because our spirits are multi-dimensional beings, our bodies are like prisons or vehicles for the soul. And I never knew all this till I died.
Wow.
But ever since then, I've had a real high-level increased psychic power, and that's one reason I'm still alive.
Do you think that would be affected at all by the 5G grid?
Yes, absolutely. We could do a whole nother 2-hour show about the pineal gland, the endocrine system, and the interface of spiritual energies in the pineal gland. This is technical, highly technical stuff, but I've done a lot of research on this stuff. The Russians use something called the squid machine. It's a superconducting quantum interference detector. It uses supercooled magnets to run pico-Gauss fields, which is a pico means a millionth of a Gauss, and a Gauss is a measurement of magnetic field strength per unit area. And what they found was guys that were going into psychic states or meditation states like yogis or mystics, they hooked these electrodes up to their brains and they mapped them using advanced parallel computer processing algorithms, and they created 3D maps in space-time of the fields, the magnetic fields put out by the pineal gland, and they found that when these mystics or psychics went into their state, their higher state of consciousness, that there was a weak magnetic field formed around the pineal gland in the shape of a tube torus. That's the same thing as an Einstein-Rosen bridge around the Schwarzschild radius of a black hole. And it's like a sausage through a donut in 3D. And this is a dimensional gateway. It's a portal. Some call it the gateway to intelligent infinity. Now, I'm laying a lot of stuff on you real quick, but the Russians found, using this advanced equipment, that there is a gateway in higher consciousness and that it has a physical analog, which is this weak magnetic field. We never knew it all these years until high technology caught up with it. And so it is at least a partial theoretical description of how psychic ability and things like that work, how we step out of our normal 3D consciousness in our ego minds and step up to higher multidimensional consciousness or higher elevated states of consciousness. That explains how people like Edgar Cayce or Gene Dixon or some of these psychics, some of the guys that made prophecies in the Bible, Ezekiel, Revelation, whatever, saw the future, like Nostradamus. Some of his predictions actually came true, and he made them 1600 in the 1600s. So how does that work? And what this does is it takes occultism and spiritualism out of the realm of religions into the realm of science, and we call it spiritual science. And so it's the cutting edge of things that are going on now. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Listen, I had a guest on the show one time who said that they were in a CIA secret program called a JUMP program. Have you ever heard of it? Is that legit?
I don't know. I've never heard of that.
It's similar to remote viewing in that they said that they went through some sort of gateway or Stargate to Mars or somewhere else like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they call that the Gateway to Intelligent Infinity, the GTTI. And what it is, the Schwarzschild radius of a black hole. A black hole is a big mass, and it's so dense, and the gravity is so strong that when matter falls into a black hole, the X-rays and gamma rays and everything that's emitted are bent back in space-time, and it's bent back into the black hole. So light never escapes it. That's why they call it a black hole. At that radius where light cannot escape, that is called the Schwarzschild radius. That's after a mathematician named Schwarzschild. And the Einstein-Rosen bridge in the general theory of relativity equations, that Einstein-Rosen bridge is formed theoretically at the Schwarzschild radius, and it looks like a sausage through a donut. It's called a tube torus, and it's where the energy comes in, and then it goes back out, and then it's reabsorbed, and it just makes a loop. And that's called a dimensional portal or a wormhole in general relativistic theoretical physics. And I went through all the equations of that stuff. When I was working on my Master of Science degree in physics, I made straight A's in advanced atomic physics, advanced nuclear physics, quantum mechanics, all that stuff. It's highly technical stuff. But anyway, these things are theoretical, and it provides a potential explanation as to why psychics can see the future and why we can know things before we know them. And that's the basis of the MK Ultra program. They had 149 sub-projects, okay? And those things dealt with all the ways the mind works and all the way our psyche works and our spiritual work. For example, MK Ultra sub-project 136, that was in 1961. That's an ESP research. It was an experimental analysis of ESP, and it evaluated the possibility of using ESP in the intelligence field because the CIA was trying to weaponize this stuff. They couldn't get this stuff to work until 1990s. I was one of the guys they hit with it. I don't even know how many people they've actually killed with this shit or made sick with it. The contractor and location of this sub-project 136 is still redacted and classified. Now, the cover and the cutout company they used was the Society for Investigation of Human Ecology. Another sub-project in MK Ultra 144 and 145, that was in 1963. That stuff's still unknown. And in this third book I'm writing right now, we're going through a lot of this old MK Ultra stuff and getting the stuff that has been declassified. And we're tying it into spiritual science and occultism. That's why the name of the book is Holding the Light, Spiritual Forces in the Black Ops, because you better believe the KGB, MI6 in England, the Israeli Mossad, Chinese intelligence, the CIA here, they are all involved in this mind warfare and spiritual warfare stuff at a high level, and they're interfacing these studies with advanced AI D-Wave, that's artificial intelligence D-Wave computers. They're doing advanced parallel computing processing algorithms like the Russians did with the SQUID machine, the superconducting quantum interference detector. They're using a variety of new FT, the Fourier transform analysis of the EMGs and all of the stuff they use to measure brain waves, alpha, theta, delta, and all that stuff. So it's going to be a really good book when I get done with it, if I can ever get it out. But we've been so busy doing interviews on this other book that I'm just really jammed for time on it. But I appreciate the opportunity to talk. It's just a lot of stuff here.
Yeah. So curious how the live chat said, is the sun a Stargate, as some say?
I don't know that. It could be. Stars that, like our sun, it's a middle-aged star, a yellow star, and it converts large amounts of hydrogen into helium in the process called fusion. Now, there could be, in the center of it, some type of higher dimensional, a Stargate, or a dimensional portal. Our standard physics, of X, Y, Z, and T, the 4 dimensions, 3 of space and 1 of time that Einstein used to describe the theory of gravity he came up with in general theory of relativity, points to the fact that the sun could have that in it. Back in 1919, the Royal British Astronomical Society, they took Einstein's equations of his general relativity about these wormholes and portals and dimensional gateways that were formulated in 1915 in the general theory of relativity. They took that for a field test, and they went to Africa, and they set up an observation, and Einstein had predicted that light waves would be bent by a gravitational field like our sun, a big gravitational field, and he predicted the amount that they'd be bent. So what they did was they waited for a total eclipse of the sun. They went down to Africa where the sun was blacked out, and they measured the light from like Sirius and different stars, and the light was bent by the sun 0.43 seconds of an arc, and that right there was proof that Einstein's equations were right. So I don't know the answer to the question. It's a good question, but the sun could possibly have a higher dimensional Stargate or a wormhole or an Einstein-Rosen bridge in the center of it. I don't know.
You said when you had the death experience, did you have one of those classic life flash before you events? Did you go to heaven, or were you sort of in the I think you described it as being able to look in your body? Is that where you remained, or did you go somewhere else?
No, I remained up over the body. I was like right where the ceiling is, and the other spirit from the other man who had died, his machine was still flatlining, going beep, and I saw a silver cord. He was about maybe 2 or 3 feet across. It looked like it was like a silverish white orb of energy. I guess that was his spirit. And I saw the cord still connected to his through his navel, and I was up there floating too, looking down while they were working on me. They had already left him for dead, and then came to me, and so I was in that place between the earth and the higher dimensions. But we are spiritual beings of light. I learned that. They can kill our bodies, and the CIA can murder us with their poisons, and they can throw us in prison and do all their crap, and they can kill our bodies, but they cannot harm our souls. And there is an afterlife. We are spiritual beings of light. I never knew all that until I died, and I have the CIA to thank for that. They're my teachers, they're my mentors, they're my friends. Thank you for killing me, because now I'm here to speak a higher truth. And you look down, you see with eyes, but you're not looking through your earth eyes, Daniel. It's kind of a strange thing to try to describe.
That's so funny. You just thank the CIA for killing you. I mean, it's not something you hear every day.
No, that's because love is the most powerful thing in the universe.
Well,
And
Cody,
all this hate, the derision, the New World Order's putting out the false flag attacks like 9/11, killing the people, pedophiling the children, doing all the dirty things that the Satanists do. We're here to hold light and to bring light and to bring truth. And love is the emotion that powers this. And so when you have love and you have real unconditional love, all fear is gone. Fear is the antithesis of love. That's why the New World Order tries to fragment our consciousness with fear and keep us down lower into this lower world. If you're full of love and you know the truth that you're a spiritual being of light and you never die, then there is no fear. And you can connect to the divine. You can connect to the higher consciousness, to the higher forces. And when you do that, you're self-empowered and fear doesn't exist. That's how I can write books like this and speak about the CIA, okay? Because I have been dead, and I am not afraid to die. And part of my mission was to come here and do this and spark other whistleblowers and other people to step forward out of their fear and confront this evil that's churning all around us. You said it yourself, Daniel. The governor of Virginia or whoever the guy was talking about letting a baby out, and then they're all going to sit around and talk about killing it. That's murder. And that's evil. And we're here to stop it.
So what would you say, Cody, to those that are on the fence of, say, rising up or resisting the current push for the New World Order, even the 5G network? Obviously, I see you find strength and solace that you did have that experience of death, and you did meet an angel. Obviously, you're at the point of the spear, but yet a whole lot of other people need to rise up. What can you tell them to help them to gird up their loins, to know that they have more strength than they ever could expect that they actually have?
Right. We're all human beings, and we're all brothers and sisters, okay? We're all from the same creation, so we're all one that way. We've just been taught and brainwashed into thinking that we're separate, and they confuse us with all these political ideologies and everything. I would tell people, Daniel, to look in their own hearts. You don't have to have a near-death experience and die in a hospital from some CIA assassination program nobody's ever heard of. Look in your own heart. Study whatever spiritual things that appeal to you. There are many different religions and many different things in the world, and God is called by many names. In many, the Apache Nation, the Indians, they call it Yulson. I'm part Cherokee Indian, and we have a name. There's the Lakota Sioux call it Tunkashila. The Muslims call it Allah. We're not here to debate or talk about any of that lower stuff. What I say to people is find that quiet space in your own heart and connect with the divine. Connect with this bigger creation out here, okay? This is a great mystery. Us human beings look at all this, and there's all the galaxies and the stars, and like that person, the question about the gateway and inside the sun. We don't know the answers to a lot of this stuff, okay? Religion has tried to give us these answers. Find the answers for yourself in your own heart and connect with the divine yourself. Call it by whatever name you want, but connect with that higher power. And if you do it through love, okay, and you realize that you truly are a spiritual being of light. These bodies here are just prisons for the soul. They're just vehicles. They're just temporary. What you really are is a spiritual being of light, and nothing can hurt you. All the New World Order people do and the Satanists do can trick you. All they can do is trick you to give your own power away and fall prey to fear and despair and all the rest of it. That's how they control you. And we don't have to be controlled. We're free.
The Bible says...
So the message that we try to spread around the world in these interviews, the Murrah building is just one particular thing. There was the Bali bombing, the Sheffield bombing, all these different false flags, all these different things. These are all just things on the earth. But look into your own heart, find your own spiritual way, and use that spiritual power to serve the light and to spread love and truth, because love is the opposite of fear and truth is the opposite of lies. The New World Order and the Satanists, that's what they use: darkness, lies, fear, deception. And this is what the battle is about fundamentally. It's the forces of light versus the forces of darkness, and they're both coming to a big head right now, Daniel. And we thank you for being on your show, and thank you for guys like you that are trying to help get the truth out. Don't listen to me. Research all this stuff for yourself and see. It all converges to the truth. It's out there, but it's being hidden from us.
Well, it is out there. The Bible says that perfect love casts out fear, because fear has torment. So I think we all need to find out that place of love in our heart. God is love, and if we find that place in our heart where God resides, we'll find that love, and that love should give us strength to carry and fear not, and just progress forward, and we can win this battle together. Cody Snodgres, I appreciate you coming on the Edge television broadcast. You have any final thoughts or anything you want to say about your book? You go right ahead.
Well, yeah, everybody plugs their book and all this. I didn't write this book for money. I've got money. We wrote this book to help stir people, especially here in America, but also overseas, that we are being lied to on a massive scale. And Facebook and Twitter and all of them with the censorship, Google, they're all part of the New World Order. Mark Zuckerberg and them are selling your data behind your backs. Our politicians are lying to us. The bankers are lying to us. It's time that we wake up and take back our country and our world. Because if this New World Order grid gets set with 5G and the chemtrail sprayings and the glyphosate in the food from Monsanto and everything, this world could turn into a prison state. It could be horrible for our grandchildren. So if you have children or grandchildren, think about what kind of world you're handing down to them. Don't just be selfish for yourself and your own life. And that's why I wrote this book, and that's why we're out speaking and talking about this. But I would just say, I don't want to preach or tell anyone how to live. I just had a weird set of experiences here. The CIA stuff that we saw was absolutely amazing and unbelievable. And night after night, Daniel, I sat with my mouth open at 2 a.m. just wondering, I've never seen this stuff's blowing my mind. I just had no idea. I had no idea. So I'm just trying to use my experiences to stir other people that there's a whole nother world of black ops, shadow governments, secret banker control. They're moving all that heroin from Afghanistan somehow, the largest crop in the history of the world. And it's all being moved. It's all being washed. The money's being washed through front companies and everything else. And a lot of our politicians are not what we think they are. So we're just trying to wake people up that there's a higher truth out there. That's the bottom line.
All right. Well, a lot of folks have been watching the show, said they appreciate you coming on the show. They say, hey, make him a regular guest. So, Cody, we got to have you back. And certainly, for sure, when you get that new book written, we want to highlight that as well. But can we have you back on the show sometime?
Yes, I'd love to. But what we need to do is pick us like one topic, because each of these things we covered, like Project Slammer or the Murrah building, there's a whole bunch more stuff behind all this, and a lot of it's in the book, and we're selling that book for $19.95 over there through the lightonconspiracies.com /Cody website. It's a PDF file. They can download it anywhere in the world. We've been doing a lot of international sales on it, but I don't know everything. I just know little parts. There's some things I know a lot about, and then there's a whole lot of things I know very little about, and that's why we appreciate the listeners sending their comments and all, because I've learned so much, Daniel, in the last year we've been doing this from the listeners, because a lot of them are smarter than I am, and they send in things, and then I get to research them and look. So we all work together to get out the truth and share and learn together. That's what's neat about it.
Well said. Yes, we will. Cody Snodgres, I appreciate you coming on the Edge television broadcast. We'll have you back, and thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, sir, and thank everybody out there for listening. We appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye.